All right, so welcome back. Today we are going to be finishing off lesson 6. And if you can remember, lesson 6 is all about these Boolean expressions, including compound Boolean expressions. And we are going to start off watching a video that goes a little bit more deeply into compound Boolean expressions and how we would actually write them in app labs in JavaScript. And then after we watch that video, we're going to apply this knowledge by examining the code of the third iteration of our lemon squeeze app. So I'm going to go ahead and start the video. Let me know if you can not hear it.
You can add even more complexity to your conditional statements by asking two questions at the same time. We use the and or operators to check two Boolean expressions at once. Let's talk about or first. If we wanted to, for example, express that you can be younger than 5 years old or older than 95 years old to get free admission to a museum, we could express that like this. Expressions that use the or operator are true if either the first or the second expression is true. Only when both expressions are false does the ORed expression evaluate to false. The AND operator is more strict. What if we wanted to say that to get the student pricing at the museum, you need to be between 12 and 21 years old? We could express that as checking whether age is greater than 12 and age is less than 21. If only one of these conditions is true, that's not good enough. Both conditions must be true to get the student discount. More and more complex questions can be represented with combinations of and or statements. What if the museum gives the student pricing to everyone if it's Tuesday or Thursday? But on every other day, you still need to be between the ages of 12 and 21 to get a discount. We could express that like this. If the day is Tuesday, or the day is Thursday, or your age is greater than 12 and age is less than 21, then you get the student pricing. Else, you get regular pricing. When using text, use parentheses to group Boolean expressions together. When evaluating this complex conditional, the computer will evaluate each Boolean expression separately and then use the rules of and or to determine if the whole expression is true or false. So if the day is Monday and the user is 25, the code would run like this. First, the computer checks if the day is Tuesday. It's not, so that is false. Then the computer checks if the day is Thursday. It's also not, so that is false as well. Since it's not Tuesday or Thursday, and at least one side must be true for an or statement to evaluate to true, that whole expression evaluates to false. Then the computer checks the other side of the or, since that could be true. The computer checks if the age is greater than 12. 25 is greater than 12, so that statement is true. Now the computer checks if the age is less than 21. 25 is not less than 21, so that statement is false. Since this was an and statement, but only one side was true, this whole expression evaluates to false, and the message displays that the user gets regular pricing. For a human, perhaps this answer was obvious from the beginning, because we are actually pretty good at dealing with logic statements when they represent real-life decision-making. But the computer needs to evaluate every expression until it can determine whether the condition is true or false. Many beginner programmers make a mistake while trying to write this expression. Is the day Tuesday or Thursday? Notice the subtle difference between the correct code and this version. This is often the result of the fact that in English, we would say, is the day Tuesday or Thursday? However, remember that computer questions are different, so we have to ask, is the day equal to Tuesday or is the day equal to Thursday? So that the computer will understand. Computers do exactly what we program them to do, but with conditionals, we can simulate complex decision-making and have the computer adapt to changes, or even seem intelligent to humans.
All right, so welcome back. Today we are going to be finishing off lesson 6, and if you can remember, lesson 6 is all about these Boolean expressions, including compound Boolean expressions. And All right, so that was a good overview of what we had talked about last week about compound conditionals using and or operators. So, as I mentioned, we are going to look at a third version of this lemon squeeze game that we looked at last week. So, if you recall, the lemon squeeze game is one where we have to collect the lemons, avoid the limes. In iteration two, they added the way that the lemon starts out really big, larger than the lime, and then it shrinks depending on your score. So the more points you get, the harder it becomes to collect the lemons. And that was used with a conditional block, checking to see what the score was. And if it was within a certain limit, it would change the size of the lemon. Today, we're going to look at the third iteration of this program. And so if you would like to play with the application, this title right here is a direct link to that activity. But as always, I will also be screen sharing and playing around with the application and discussing what I see and asking you all to kind of follow along. So um, feel free to also play around with it on your own device if you're able to. All right, so I have gone ahead and opened this up, and what we're gonna do is we're just gonna play around with it and kind of see what's different. So right away, I can see that there is a difference. There's now it now appears to have some sort of a login screen where it did not have that before. Um, so it says that I need to sign in by choosing my username and typing my password. Now, you'll notice that it doesn't actually say how to log in. It doesn't give you the password. But guess what? Because this is a super simple program, we can actually just look at the source code. So looking over here, uh, if the username is Lemonhead and the password is lemon123, so I can figure out that the password in this case is lemon123. Not a super secure way of doing this. This is not how actual programs are coded these days, because then it would be really easy to hack in and figure out people's passwords. But for our learning, this is totally fine. So we're going to go ahead and enter that password of lemon123. If we press play, it looks like we log in. Sweetwater passwords, yes, they're very insecure. You know exactly what the default password is. It's the person's birthday, so all right. So, yeah, so it looks like once you put in a valid a valid username password combination, it's pretty much the same from then. I noticed that there is still that kind of glitch where it starts off the lemon not at the correct size, but that is not ours to fix this time. It wasn't ours to fix last time either. That was kind of an added bonus we decided to do. But basically, the game behaves pretty much as you would expect. It continues to shrink the lemon as our score gets larger. Let's see what happens if we just enter something that's incorrect. Also, another thing that I notice is that you probably wouldn't want to do in production code is actually showing the password as the user types it. That's probably not a great idea. But again, this is just for educational purposes, so that's totally fine. So I'm going to just put like password for a fake password. And I notice that I do not get the game screen and I hear a bad noise, a sad noise. That probably indicates that that is not a valid login. Um, let me revert this because I realized that I have some code in there that we're going to write together. The other username and password combination that this starts off with, if we go down here, there's an else if. And also, if you notice, there's a second username here that I can select, Mellow Yellow. If I just look at the code, the user if when the username is Mellow Yellow and the password is I love lemon, so I'm gonna go ahead and say, okay, that's their password. I can go ahead and put I love lemons, and I am in. Okay, awesome. So, the added functionality here is basically that now this game requires a a login, right? Why? Right now it's not completely obvious, but maybe they're planning to do something that it tracks different users' high scores, for instance, and puts it on a leaderboard. That would be a reason why you would want a user name system for a game like this. All right, cool. So let's get into the logic of all of this. I kind of quickly like talked about it, how I got the username and password from the code. But now what we're going to do is we're going to switch back over to the paired X slide, and you're going to think about that new code a little bit more deeply by converting it to a flowchart so that you can kind of visualize the decision making process here. So let's see. The decision in this case, let me get my annotation, is going to be uh, is the username password combination valid? And what you're going to do is you're going to look at the code snippet that is on the left here. This is the same code that we were looking at, but now it's in text mode. Um, what you're going to do is you're going to go through this code and convert it to this flowchart here. So starting with the conditional in the if, you would put that conditional here in the decision-making diamond, and then kind of follow through and tell me what happens if that's true and what happens when it's false. You can see that there's going to be another decision here, and then tell me if that is true, what happens, and what happens when it's false. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to work on that. Do not worry if you get stuck, because as always, we will be showing multiple examples of student answers and talking about um, how they work, explaining the answer. All right. So I see that everyone is pretty much on the right track. Some of you might not yet be quite done, but that's okay. I'm just going to go over two examples of students' answers so that everyone has the opportunity to see how to do the process. So go ahead and come back to my shared screen and let's look at a couple of responses. So this student went ahead and they saw that the first decision they had to make is to check to see if this username and password combo was entered, if it was Lemonhead for the username and Lemon123 for the password. If that was true, go ahead and allow them access to the game. Awesome. But if it was false, we need to check to see if it's the other valid username and password combo. If the username is Mellow Yellow and the password is I love lemons, then if that's true, allow them access. False, deny the person login because that's the only two username and password combinations that we're allowing right now. Um, I liked this person went ahead and this one right here, they also kind of added the fact that like if this first one's true, you're logged into the lemon head account. But if this second one, if you went down to the second one and this was true, you're logged into the mellow yellow account. And otherwise else, right? You don't get to play the game and you get a sad noise. So that was another good way of explaining it as well. So yeah, well done, everyone. Um, so now let me go ahead and clear my annotations here. What we're going to do is we're going to modify this program a little bit. Right now, we're only allowing two combinations of usernames and passwords. Um, let's go ahead and add another one. Let's add our own username and password to this code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the third iteration of lemon squeeze. And I'm going to find that blue block of code. And I'm staying in text mode for now, just so that you can see that blue, starting with line number 8. Okay. Um, and by the way, you can imagine that coding a program that uses a user login system, you probably wouldn't want to do it like this because depending on like how many users you had, like hundreds of users, thousands of users, you would have so many else ifs, right? Could you imagine typing in all of those usernames and passwords? Not only is that not secure, but man, is that going to be a lot of lines of code. But again, this is for our learning for conditionals, and this is how we're going to do it. So if I'm in block mode, I could just add another little segment here. And notice how it adds an else down here. And I would have to put my else code down here. I'm gonna go ahead if it's okay. I'm gonna demonstrate me. I'm gonna demonstrate how to do this in text mode instead. So let me start from scratch here. I'm gonna go back into text mode once this reloads. So I'm gonna go ahead and show the text here. And now what I'm gonna do is here's my else. I want my else to be the same. I still want it to just not set the game screen and just play a sad noise. So I'm going to keep that else there. But after my last else if, so this is my last else if ending here, I'm going to enter another else if here. So I'm going to go ahead and press return on line 24. And I can go ahead and start putting my else if. And in between these parentheses, I'm going to have to put my conditional expression. So right in here, I'm going to have to put that conditional. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and open my curly braces and then close them down here. Oh, it actually added it for me, so I'm not going to do that. You'll notice that the way that they're formatting it, they're just kind of hugging each line, each conditional component so that the closing curly is actually on the same line as the next component. That's a stylistic choice. I'll go ahead and go with it since that's what they've been doing. All right, so you'll notice that there's a little error here, and that's because we haven't put in our conditional statement yet. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm basically going to follow the same format that you see here. I'm going to start off with if my username is, and I get to pick, I'm going to go ahead and just say Kazemi. And let's see, and my password is, by the way, don't use a real password here. Don't use a real username password combination here. I don't want you to leak your data on code.work. So I'm just going to put password. My password is password. All right. Then what do I want to happen? I want the same stuff to happen. I want the game screen to get the screen to be set to the game screen, and I want that happy, vibrant game carton start game to long.mp3 sound to play. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this segment of lines 2 and 23. You just highlight those two lines and press Control C to copy. Come down to this line inside of the else if, and just go ahead and paste it with a Control V. Awesome. Okay, cool. If I go ahead and show blocks, you can see that it looks pretty much identical to that other else if, except that the username that it's checking for is Kazemi, and the password it's checking for is password. Cool. Now, there's actually one other thing to do, because if you notice, if I try to run this, the username is a drop down. You don't actually enter the username, so I can't enter Kazemi here. So I'm also going to have to edit my UI, my user interface. So right now I'm in code mode, and that's how I'm able to alter this code here. I want to go now to design mode to change this drop down to include my new username that I want to allow. So I'm going to go ahead and click on design. And if I click on this element, the name dropdown element, I can now see the properties in my workspace here. And so the second thing right here is this thing called options. This is the list of usernames that come up as options. So if I scroll down and just add my other username, Kazemi, if I then run this, I now can see that as an option here. So I can just select Kazemi and enter my very secure password of password and then press play. It lets me in. Awesome. And then I can test out that it really does work. I'm going to press run. I'm going to select Kazemi and just enter some random password that shouldn't work. And I do get that no, I'm not going to let you in sound. Cool. All right. So to do this, all we did was we went into the code and we entered in another else if. Now, for any username and password combination, I would have to add an additional else if. And that's totally fine. I mean, it's very inefficient code-wise, but the way that control blocks work, it's totally fine because you can have an infinite number of else ifs in your conditional blocks. You can only have one if and one else, but you can have all of the else ifs that you want. Let's see. We have a question in the chat. Why does my game pause whenever I hover over a lime? That's interesting. Let me see if I get that behavior as well. Let me go ahead and log in. Play. Let me press lime. Huh, I don't get that. But a couple things to check. Maybe looking at the slider down here, making sure it's all the way to the rabbit. Let's take a look at the Lime event handler starting on around line 61. I'm wondering if maybe your computer's just messing up when it's changing to a random location. Does it like pause like absolutely halts and stops, or does it just lag? That's my question. It just stops? It says game pause. Oh, you might have debugging on. So you might have like clicked here on the left. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and share your screen because that's interesting to see. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Wait, how do I share, Miss Kazemi?
At the bottom of the Zoom screen, there should be something that's called share screen. Yeah.
Wait, I can't. Oh, it's
Did
on
you
the
see
middle.
it? Let me see if one participant can share at a time. Oh wait, who can
All right,
share?
is it
All
right there?
participants. Yeah. Okay, I see it now. Okay, cool. All right. Can you scroll?
Wait, it stopped doing it.
Oh, it stopped doing it. So
Yeah.
one of the things that might have happened is you might have clicked on one of the numbers on the left in the code, and that sets what's called a breakpoint. And so it will actually pause so that you can debug your code. So that might have been what happened. That's what I think happened. All right. But thank you for asking that question. Let me go ahead and share my screen again, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Let's see here. This one right here. No, that's fine. Please interrupt because that's when you're asking questions like that, we're learning what's going on. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the presentation slide. Okay, so what we're gonna do to wrap up is these are kind of the concepts that we learned, checking multiple conditions using if, and then adding those else ifs in the middle for multiple different conditions, and then else behaving as a catch-all if none of those are true. That's kind of the big idea that we learned here. So as I said, you can add as many else ifs as you need for however conditions you need to check to provide as many options you want your program to implement. So to wrap things up, there is one piece of homework that you could probably just knock out right now. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that is. If we go to our classroom here, if you go to classwork, underneath Unit 4, there is the check for understanding. It is a link to, I believe, puzzle number 10. It should be 10 here. There we go. So this is a check for understanding that you'll do directly in code.org. It's asking you when creating an if-else if statement, you should always make your first condition the most specific. Write a short paragraph responding to the questions below. Now, if any of these questions do confuse you, I think that's why I linked to this, you can go back one step, and this is a nice summary of the stuff that we covered that will help you answer this question. So if you don't know where to start to answer these questions, go back, read through this, reread it as many times as you want, as you need, and then answer that question. This is your homework that is due today. And like I said, it's fairly quick, so that's why I'm making it due today. Any questions on this? I'll go ahead and put this link in the chat, but again, it's also on Google Classroom. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and